You can feel completely calm and rational and still have zero clue what to do next. And if that contradiction has ever frustrated you, listen closely. See, that's not a failure. It's a misunderstanding that keeps thoughtful people stuck. Well, over the next few minutes, I'm going to clear up 3 ideas that quietly change how this whole experience makes sense. First, why feeling ready doesn't automatically lead to action. Second, why mental clarity and decision making are not the same process. And third, what really helps clarity form without forcing a decision. And by the end, this phase won't feel like a problem anymore. It'll finally make sense. Let's name the experience itself, because chances are you'll recognize it instantly. You feel calmer than before, more steady, maybe even ready. And yet, you still hesitate. If you've ever thought, why do I still feel stuck if I'm already ready to go? That question is the key. This isn't a sign that something went wrong, it's a sign that something shifted. The problem is a common belief most thoughtful people hold, that once you feel centered, the answers should just show up, fully formed. And that belief is what makes this phase feel so frustrating instead of useful. So let's take a look at the first idea. Why internal calm just doesn't automatically create clear action the way you'd hope it would. You see, one of the most confusing moments in personal growth or inner work is realizing that feeling calm inside doesn't mean knowing what to do next. Most people just assume, oh, those two things are going to show up together. That once you feel steady, focused, or balanced, you should also feel sure about what your next move is going to be. And when that certainty doesn't appear, the mind quickly looks for reasons. Something must be wrong. I must be missing an important piece. Oh, I must not be thinking about this the right way. Or, even worse, maybe this sense of inner knowing isn't real at all. Have you ever noticed that the calm arrives, but the answer doesn't? You see, the problem isn't that your inner sense failed to give you clarity. The problem is the belief that clarity is the first thing that this inner process is meant to give. You see, in reality, clarity is rarely the first step. Stability is what comes first. See, before direction can actually help, your inner system has to settle down enough to receive it without twisting it all around. That settling often shows up as calm, or reassurance, or a quiet sense of presence long before it shows up as a clear plan. And in a moment, I want to explain why this order matters more than most people realize. Think about how people act when they're anxious or overwhelmed. Even when they know what they should do, they struggle to do it well. They overthink, they doubt themselves, they replay conversations, they imagine every possible outcome. They even argue with themselves in their head. Now imagine trying to receive quiet inner guidance while you're in that state. Anything that comes through just gets mixed up with fear and urgency or self-doubt. See, in that situation, more insight would only create more confusion. So here's a simple way to picture it. It's kind of like trying to read a road sign through a dirty windshield. The problem isn't the sign. The problem is that the glass has to be cleared first. Calm is what clears the glass. Direction comes later once you can actually see. Without that clearing, even the right signal looks blurry. So the first job of this early phase isn't to tell you what to do. It's to quiet your inner environment enough so that whatever comes next can land clearly. That quieting doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like less noise, less pressure, less urgency inside. And because it doesn't come with instructions attached, people often ignore it or just assume that it's not enough. And that's where the confusion grows. When calm arrives, people treat it kind of like a stepping stone instead of just a place to rest. They think, okay, I feel better. So now where's the answer? And when the answer doesn't come right away, they start doubting the calm itself. They question it. Is this the real calm, or am I avoiding something? Or is this trust, or am I just giving up? That kind of questioning brings tension back, and the system just never fully settles. What's really happening during this time is that your inner orientation is changing. You're no longer reacting from panic or stress, but you just haven't yet lined up with a new direction. And that middle space feels pretty strange, and anything unfamiliar often feels wrong. But unfamiliar doesn't mean incorrect. It usually means you're just in transition. Well, what if the calm you're feeling isn't missing something? What if it's just early? See, that's why people who are thoughtful or deeply self aware often struggle more here, not less. They notice small internal shifts. They feel when things just don't line up. They sense the gap between calm and clarity very clearly. And that gap feels very uncomfortable. People who reflect less often move forward quickly because they don't stay in that middle space. They act, adjust, and just keep going. Reflective people pause, watch, and wait for things to feel aligned. But neither way is better. It's just a reflective path that requires more patience. If you feel deeply calm but still stuck, it's often because your system is still finishing that early reset. Old habits of urgency, fear, or obligation have loosened, but new direction hasn't fully formed yet. That doesn't mean that nothing is happening. It just means that something important is shifting underneath the surface. And this is exactly where many people make a move that quietly sets them back. And we'll talk about that next. See, the mistake is believing that this settling process owes you instant clarity. In truth, it often gives you stability first. Clarity that comes before stability usually falls apart under pressure. Stability that comes first creates a strong base for that direction when it does finally show up. Now, you see, once you understand that, the experience begins to finally make sense. You're not waiting because you're blocked. You're waiting because your system is just recalibrating. And that recalibration can't be rushed without damaging the clarity that you're hoping for. Just think back for a moment. Was there a time recently when you felt less anxious about a situation, even though you still didn't have an answer? Notice if something shifted before any decision was ever made. So let's talk about the second concept, because there is a difference between presence and instruction. See, a major source of frustration during this phase comes from mixing up presence with instruction. See, presence feels very supportive, it feels steady, feels like you're not alone the way you might have felt before. And because it feels important, people assume it should also tell them what to do. But presence doesn't give orders. Presence just simply creates the right conditions. And understanding this difference turns out to matter much more than most people realize. Think about the difference between, say, sitting with someone who just makes you feel safe and being handed a list of chores. Now, both can help in a different way, but they're not the same experience, are they? Presence is about connection. Instruction is about direction. When you confuse the two, you start asking the wrong thing from the wrong experience. Many people unknowingly expect calm to give them answers. They sit quietly, waiting for clarity to appear. They notice a sense of peace and then immediately ask, okay, so what should I do now? But peace isn't there to answer that question. Peace is just there to make sure that when an answer does arrive, it isn't twisted by fear, urgency, or the pressure to get it right. Now, in a moment, I'll explain what actually happens when we put that pressure on calm. It kind of helps to think of it like letting muddy water settle in a glass. See, if you shake the glass and demand to see clearly, the water stays cloudy. But if you let it sit, the dirt slowly sinks and the water clears on its own. Calm works the same way. It doesn't force clarity, it just allows it. This misunderstanding creates a quiet kind of pressure. Calm turns into something that you feel you have to use correctly. You're calm only as long as it gives you results. The moment it doesn't, you start doubting it. And the moment you doubt it, the calm fades. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was never meant to carry that weight. Have you ever felt peaceful and then suddenly you felt frustrated that peace didn't come with a set of instructions or a map? Because you see, presence just naturally brings stability. It slows things down. It helps you see more clearly. It lowers emotional reactions. But those qualities aren't very helpful if you're trying to rush a decision, are they? See, they are essential if you want to make a clear and steady decision. This is also why rushing past this phase usually creates problems later. But we'll come back to that. See, this also explains why people often feel more confused right after they start feeling calmer. The contrast becomes really clear. When you were anxious, everything felt urgent, even if nothing made sense. When calm shows up, urgency just kind of fades, and the lack of direction becomes much more noticeable. That doesn't mean calm caused the confusion, it just means that calm revealed it to you. If that sounds familiar, you might recognize the inner conversation. Well, I feel okay, but I don't know where I'm headed. I feel supported, but I don't know the next step. Sound familiar? And because we're taught that progress means movement, not knowing what to do can feel like you're actually moving backward. But it's not. It's just a pause that's actually pointing you forward in the right direction. Presence also protects you. It kind of keeps you from acting too soon, stops you from making choices just to escape discomfort. It creates enough space for some options to fade away on their own instead of being pushed aside out of impatience. That doesn't look impressive, doesn't feel productive, but it often allows the right clarity to rise instead of just being the loudest one. Now, the more you trust presence to do its job without forcing it to become instruction, the more helpful it becomes. When you stop asking calm to tell you what to do, you let it do what it does best. Settle your system, lower the noise, and create space where clarity can grow naturally. Imagine somebody sitting quietly with you when you're just totally overwhelmed, not fixing anything, just staying with you. Notice how that alone changes how you feel, even without advice. That's what presence does. It doesn't instruct, it just stabilizes. And you see, that's a small shift, but a powerful one. It changes the relationship from trying to pull answers out of stillness to working with it. Instead of demanding results, you allow stillness to do the job. And most of the time, that work stays unseen until it's finished. So let me ask you, what changes if you stop asking calm for answers and just let it settle for you? So finally, let's ask why forcing action keeps you stuck longer. Because when clarity doesn't show up as fast as you expect, the natural urge is just to jump in and do something, to decide anything at all, just to feel like you're moving forward again. And while that urge makes sense, it's one of the most common ways people accidentally stay confused even longer. When you feel the need to decide quickly, does it feel calm or does it feel tense? See, most forced decisions aren't driven by readiness. They're driven by discomfort with not knowing. The mind wants an ending. It's a loop, right? It wants to close that loop. It wants an answer. It wants to feel like progress is happening. So it creates urgency. It tells you waiting means failing. It tells you that pausing means avoiding. And under that kind of pressure, decisions get made not because they feel right, but because they feel relieving. Have you ever made a choice just to stop the discomfort of not knowing or not finishing? That relief doesn't last. See, once the pressure fades, doubt usually comes rushing back in. You start asking, was that the right move? Did I decide too fast? Did I miss something? Now you're not just unsure, you're unsure and you're dealing with the results of a rushed choice. The mind jumps back in, replaying, rethinking, and picking everything apart. The clarity that you hoped action would bring never shows up because the action wasn't built on clarity in the first place. See, this cycle is just exhausting. And that's a big reason why people feel like they keep going over the same decisions over and over and over again. See, they act to escape uncertainty, and then they doubt the action. They try to fix it, and then they doubt again. The issue isn't being unable to decide. The issue is deciding too early. See, real clarity feels different. It's quieter. It's less rushed. Doesn't push you to move right away. Often it feels obvious when you look back later, though. But because we're taught To admire fast decisions, we often ignore these softer signals and we chase louder ones. We confuse intensity with certainty. We confuse urgency with alignment. Think of it kind of like grabbing a puzzle piece before you even see the whole picture. You can force it into place, but if it doesn't fit, you'll keep adjusting it over and over and over. Clarity is kind of like seeing the picture first. And once you do, the right piece fits without force. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that forced decisions have a certain feeling. There's a tightening, a bracing, a low-level worry about whether the choice is going to hold up. Clarity feels different. It feels open. Doesn't need defending. It doesn't need constant checking. Now, learning to tell the difference matters. And the only way to learn it is by staying with uncertainty long enough to see how it behaves without pushing it around. That can feel really uncomfortable, but it also teaches you a lot. See, when you stop forcing action, something interesting happens. The noise keeps dropping. Options that once felt urgent begin to lose their pull. The mental debates that are in your head quiet down, and slowly, without effort, one direction starts to feel more natural than all the rest. Not rushed, not dramatic, just clear. And that's why clarity is often described as removing things rather than adding them. You don't suddenly gain something new. You let go of what doesn't belong there. What's left feels simple instead of complicated. So here's a quick way to notice clarity in the future. As you think about a decision that you've been pushing, check in with your body right now. Is there tightness, bracing, or is there space? Clarity usually feels spacious. Pressure usually doesn't. And as you notice that, ask yourself, are you feeling pushed to the side or pulled toward understanding? So if you've been pushing yourself forward, this way of thinking may feel backwards, but often the fastest way out of confusion is to stop trying to escape it. To let things settle in their own time. That doesn't mean doing nothing forever. It just means knowing when waiting is part of the process, not a failure of it. And when you understand this, feeling guided but not yet directed stops feeling like a dead end. It starts to feel like kind of a waiting area, a place where things are lining up quietly before movement begins again. And that understanding alone can take a lot of the pressure off. And when you try to listen for guidance and everything sounds the same, that usually becomes the moment that mental noise gets mistaken for intuition. Now, in episode 92, titled, You're Not Losing Your Intuition, You're Misreading It, you'll learn how to tell the difference so that clarity becomes easier to recognize. It's also going to give you a feeling of decisions that feel more solid. So go give that one a listen. I hope this episode has been helpful for you. And until next time, this is Chris, sending you calm and clarity.